It had been 3 days since I last heard from my wife, Mara. 3 long, punishing days. Normally, she called every evening whenever she visited our daughter, Lila, in Clearwater. But this time, nothing. No messages. No calls. No replies. The silence had started to sound louder than the road beneath my tires. I kept one hand tight on the steering wheel and the other near my phone, as if willing it to light up. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, gray ribbons under a sun that refused to set. I told myself a dozen times that I was overreacting, that Mara was probably busy helping with the baby, or maybe her phone had died. But deep down, something didn't feel right. Our daughter's tone had changed in recent months. Her calls were still frequent, but lately they always circled back to money, bills, loans, repairs. At first it sounded like any young couple's struggle, but then she started asking about our savings, about inheritance, about just-in-case plans. I'd mentioned it to Mara, but she laughed softly, brushing it off while folding laundry. "She's our only child, Alan," she'd said. "She's just anxious. We'll help her find her footing." Maybe she was right. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Still, when Mara stopped answering completely, something inside me snapped from worry into action. I packed a bag, bought flowers on the way, pretending it was just a surprise visit, and drove the 4 hours to Clearwater. By the time I reached their neighborhood, the sky had turned a dull orange. The houses all looked the same, quiet, perfect, peaceful, too peaceful. Lila's car wasn't in the driveway and the curtains were drawn. I rang the bell once, then twice. No answer. I peered through the front window. The living room looked exactly as I remembered it. Tidy, warm colors, nothing out of place. But the stillness felt unnatural, as if the house were holding its breath. I pulled out my phone again. Same unanswered messages, same silence. Then, out of nowhere, a voice called behind me, "Wait! Don't go inside." I turned sharply. A man was hurrying across the lawn, mid-40s in khaki shorts and a polo. His face carried an urgency that froze me in place. "You're Alan, right? Mara's husband?" My heart kicked hard against my ribs. "Yes, who are you?" He swallowed, glancing at the dark windows behind me. "I'm Owen, your daughter's neighbor. I need to tell you something. Something that happened here last week." The air thickened. "What kind of something?" Owen's voice cracked slightly. "There were screams, Alan. From your daughter's house, and the woman screaming, she was begging for help." If what Owen said was true, then my wife's silence wasn't just worry, it was warning. And I was already too late to stop it. Owen's words hit harder than the humid air pressing down on us. "Screams?" I repeated, barely trusting my own voice. He nodded quickly, eyes darting toward the house. It was around midnight, maybe a little after. I was watching a late game when I heard a woman crying out. It wasn't arguing, it was terror. She kept saying she couldn't breathe, begging someone to call an ambulance. My mouth went dry. "And you're sure it came from here?" He pointed toward Lila's front window. "I know that voice, Alan. Your wife's been over plenty of times. It was her. I'm sure of it." I felt my knees weaken. I gripped the porch rail just to stay upright. What happened next? Owen took a shaky breath. I went out to check, but before I could cross the yard, Lila and her husband came out. They said everything was fine. Curtis waved at me, told me to go back inside, that it was just a bad dream. But that scream, he shook his head. That wasn't any dream. A heaviness spread through my chest, each beat slower than the one before. "What did you do after that?" "I called emergency services anyway," he said. "Couldn't live with myself if I didn't." The ambulance came about 10 minutes later. I saw the paramedics wheel a woman out on a stretcher. "Alan, it was your wife. She looked barely alive." The world around me blurred, the manicured lawns, the distant sound of sprinklers, the last fading sunlight. Everything shrank until there was only his voice and the dull roar in my ears. Did they say where they took her?" He looked down ashamed. I thought family would reach out. I didn't ask. But after the ambulance left, your daughter and Curtis went right back inside. Next morning, gone. Cars, lights, everything. For a moment I couldn't breathe. My mind screamed no, but every detail fit together too perfectly to ignore. I forced my voice steady. You said this was last week? Last Thursday night, Owen confirmed. I thought maybe she'd recovered, until I saw you pull up alone. I stumbled back toward my car, fumbling with my phone. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped it. I dialed emergency dispatch, forcing calm into my tone. Yes, my name is Alan Morgan. I'm calling about an ambulance that went to 89 West River Lane last Thursday. The patient was my wife. Please, can you tell me where she was taken? The line went quiet except for keyboard clicks. Finally, a woman's voice said, she was transported to Clearwater General Hospital. Critical condition. I didn't remember hanging up or thanking her. Owen's voice came from somewhere behind me. Do you need help finding it? I opened my car door, eyes fixed on the road ahead. No, I said, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. But thank you for telling me. As the engine roared to life, a single thought cut through the chaos. If my wife was still alive, then someone had tried to make sure she wouldn't be. I was on my way to the hospital, but whoever hurt Mara might already be waiting there. The drive to Clearwater General felt like moving through fog. Streetlights blurred into pale streaks across the windshield, while my thoughts raced faster than the car. Every mile brought the same question, looping like a broken tape. What did they do to her? When I reached the hospital, the automatic doors parted with a hiss. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and sleepless nights. A nurse behind the desk looked up as I approached. My wife, Mara Morgan, I managed. She was brought here last Thursday. I need to know if she's alive. The nurse's fingers flew over the keyboard. One moment, sir. Yes, Mrs. Morgan is in intensive care. She's stable now, but she was critical when admitted. The word stable should have comforted me. It didn't. What happened to her? I'm sorry, the nurse said gently. A detective will need to speak with you. She picked up a phone, murmured something, then gestured toward a waiting area. Minutes later, a woman in plain clothes approached, short hair, no-nonsense eyes, a badge clipped to her belt. Mr. Morgan, Detective Reyes, I've been assigned to your wife's case. Case? I echoed. This isn't an accident? Her silence answered before her words did. We're investigating the possibility of foul play. Your wife was admitted with traces of 2 medications in her bloodstream, one a heavy sedative, the other a cardiac drug. The combination could have stopped her heart. My stomach twisted. You're saying someone poisoned her? We can't confirm intent yet, she said carefully, but given the dosages, it wasn't self-inflicted by mistake. I stared at the white corridor behind her, each door leading to someone else's private nightmare. Where is she now? Room 214. She's still unconscious, but the doctors say she might wake soon. Reyes's tone softened. We'll need a full statement later, but for now, you should see her. The ICU was quiet, except for the rhythmic beeping of machines. Mara lay motionless, pale against the sheets, wires tracing lifelines across her body. I sat beside her and took her hand. It felt cold and impossibly small. I'm here, I whispered. Whatever happened, I'll find the truth. A nurse adjusted the monitors and slipped away, leaving me with the hum of machines and the taste of metal in my mouth. I'd spent years as a lawyer, learning how evidence built and collapsed stories, but nothing prepares you to live inside one. Somewhere down the hall, footsteps echoed, measured, deliberate. Detective Reyes reappeared at the doorway. Mr. Morgan, she said quietly, I just got confirmation. The toxicology results are conclusive. Your wife was given a lethal mix, enough to kill 2 people. I stood slowly, every nerve tightening. Then whoever did this tried to finish her off. Reyes nodded once. And we believe she ingested it at your daughter's house. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the bed rail, trying to steady myself. If Mara had been poisoned in my daughter's home, then the danger wasn't a stranger, it was family. I didn't sleep that night. The chair beside Mara's bed became my post, my punishment, and my prayer. Machines whispered and blinked, counting out the seconds my wife clung to life. Every sound in that room was a promise I refused to break. Around 5 in the morning, something changed. Her fingers twitched, barely, but enough to make my heart lurch. I leaned forward. Mara? Her eyelids fluttered, struggling against whatever darkness held her. Then, slowly they opened. Her gaze drifted across the room before landing on me. Alan! The word rasped like sandpaper. I pressed her hand gently. I'm here. You're safe now. She blinked, confusion clouding her face. What happened? You've been in the hospital a week, I said. You were poisoned. 2 different medications mixed together. Her breath caught. Poisoned? Detective Reyes stepped closer from the doorway. She'd been waiting outside for signs of life. Mrs. Morgan, I'm Detective Reyes. I know this is hard, but can you tell us what you remember about the night you collapsed? Mara swallowed, eyes darting as if searching through fog. Lila made dinner. Pasta with vegetables. Curtis poured wine. We were laughing at first. Then I started to feel dizzy. My heart was racing, and the room began to spin. I clenched my jaw. I told Lila to call an ambulance, Mara continued. She said it was just food poisoning. She told me to lie down. Her voice cracked, but it got worse. I couldn't breathe. I begged her. Please, Lila, I need help. Detective Reyes's pen paused mid-stroke. And what did she do? She looked at Curtis, Mara whispered. He walked to the door and locked it, said, You'll be fine in a minute. I knew then something was terribly wrong. The words cut through me like glass. I'd cross-examined killers in court, but nothing compared to hearing my wife describe our daughter as her jailer. I screamed, she said, tears streaking down her cheeks. I screamed for help, hoping someone would hear. After that, nothing, just darkness. Reyes exchanged a glance with me, professional sympathy masking quiet fury. Mrs. Morgan, she said softly, to your knowledge, do either of them have medical training or prescriptions for those drugs? Curtis takes sleeping pills. I saw the bottle in their bathroom. And Lila keeps his things organized. She knows what he takes. Reyes nodded, closing her notebook. That helps a lot. We'll confirm everything. When she left, I sat beside Mara again. Her eyes met mine, filled with a pain I couldn't fix. She's our daughter, Mara whispered. How could she do that? I couldn't answer. All I could promise was truth. I don't know, but I'll make sure we find out, and that she never hurts anyone again. For the first time, Mara's grip tightened around my fingers. Then don't stop until you do. My wife had survived the poison, but now the hunt for the ones who served it had just begun. Detective Reyes returned later that afternoon with a folder under her arm and a look that told me she hadn't come for small talk. Mr. Morgan, she said, taking the seat across from me in the hospital cafeteria, I've been reviewing some things. I think your daughter and her husband may be in deeper trouble than we first thought. She slid the folder across the table. Inside, copies of bank statements, phone records, and notes scrawled in her neat handwriting. Your daughter made 40-plus calls to credit agencies over the past 2 months, Reyes continued. Mortgage late notices, maxed cards, unpaid utilities. Then, 2 weeks before your wife's poisoning, she contacted your family attorney, asking what happens to an estate if both spouses pass without updating their will. The air left my lungs in one slow, hollow breath. So they were drowning in debt. And looking for a lifeline, Reyes said, a big one. I stared down at the paperwork. My name, Mara's, even our property address, all highlighted in yellow. You're saying they planned this? She didn't answer directly. People under financial pressure make choices they wouldn't normally consider. But intent is hard to prove. We'll need concrete evidence, emails, prescriptions, search history. I'll get a warrant. After she left, I sat there for a long time, the hum of vending machines filling the silence. I'd spent my career building cases on evidence and motive. Now I was watching one form around my own child. That night, I drove back home to Tampa to collect documents Reyes might need. The house felt colder than before, every family photo suddenly suspicious. There was one picture I couldn't stop staring at. Lila at age 10, covered in flour, baking cookies with Mara. The smile that once melted me now looked rehearsed. By morning, Mara was stable enough to be discharged into home care. She moved slowly, fragile, but determined. "If they did this, Alan," she said quietly from the passenger seat, "don't hold back because she's our daughter." "I won't," I promised. "Not this time." A day later, Reyes called again. "Search warrant approved. We're going through their house today. I'd suggest you stay put. We'll handle it." But staying put wasn't something I was built for. I waited anyway, pacing until my phone finally rang again that evening. Her tone carried restrained excitement. "You were right to worry. We found something. An empty prescription bottle for sleeping pills with Curtis's name on it. But here's what matters. There's a laptop on their desk. The browser history includes searches like how to mix sedatives with heart medication and non-traceable poison symptoms." My grip tightened around the phone. "That's premeditation." "It's evidence," she replied. "And now, we move forward with arrest warrants." I hung up, staring out the window as night bled into the city skyline. I should have felt victory, but all I felt was grief, because every new piece of proof tore away the last pieces of the daughter I thought I knew. They hadn't just tried to kill my wife, they'd studied how to do it perfectly. And now, it was my turn to study them. 2 days later, the call I'd been waiting for came in. "Alan, it's Detective Reyes. We've located them. They just returned to their house. We're moving in now." My pulse hammered as I gripped the phone tighter. "Do you need me there?" "No," she said firmly. "Let us do our job. I'll update you once they're in custody," I wanted to argue, but reason overruled rage. I stayed home, pacing, waiting, listening to the clock tick like a countdown. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. "They're under arrest," Reyes said. "Both of them. We're bringing them in for questioning." When I finally saw the footage on the evening news, my breath caught. Lila and Curtis, handcuffed, being led out of their home. My daughter looked smaller than I remembered, face pale, eyes wide, but not terrified, just angry. Curtis avoided the cameras altogether, his jaw locked like a man rehearsing denial. The next day, Reyes called me into the station to observe the preliminary questioning through the one-way glass. Inside the interrogation room, Lila sat across from her lawyer, a tissue crumpled in her hand. Curtis sat in a separate room next door. Reyes leaned close to me and whispered, "Watch how fast the stories fall apart." The detective entered the room and started gently, her voice even. "Lila, tell me about the night your mother got sick." Lila sniffed, lowering her eyes. "She wasn't poisoned. She took those pills herself. She'd been anxious lately, depressed even. She said she couldn't sleep. I didn't know she'd taken so many. Reyes didn't flinch. Interesting, because the dosage we found could stop 2 hearts, not 1. Lila froze. In the next room, Curtis's voice came through the speakers. Same line, same excuse. Word for word, they'd rehearsed it. Then Reyes switched tactics. "We have the toxicology report. We have the prescriptions. We have your browser history." She let the silence stretch until even I could feel the weight of it. This wasn't an accident. For the first time, I saw fear crack through my daughter's expression. Her hands shook, tissue trembling between her fingers. "It wasn't supposed to go that far," she whispered. Reyes leaned in. "Then tell me how far it was supposed to go." But Lila's lawyer cut in. "No further questions. My client invokes her right to remain silent." Across the glass, I felt something inside me close forever. The little girl who used to run to me after thunderstorms was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. Reyes joined me outside the room. They're lawyering up, but don't worry, we'll get them. Curtis is cracking faster. He's the weak link. As I drove home that night, I could still hear Lila's voice in my head. That quiet, trembling line. It wasn't supposed to go that far. What did she mean by that far? How far had they planned to go? I thought the worst was over when they were arrested. But the next revelation would prove this nightmare had only begun. It happened 3 mornings later. Detective Reyes called just after sunrise, her voice sharper than usual. "Alan, I thought you'd want to know first." Curtis talked. I sat up straight in bed. Talked? As in, confessed? "Partially," she said. "He's trying to save himself, but he gave us enough to bury them both." "Come to the station." By the time I arrived, the hallway outside the interview rooms buzzed with low voices and coffee fumes. Through the glass, I saw Curtis, same rumpled shirt from his arrest, eyes red, fingers drumming the table like a man on the edge of panic. Reyes joined me. We offered him a reduced charge if he cooperates. He's terrified of doing real time. I folded my arms, then let him talk. The audio feed clicked on. Curtis's voice cracked at first, then poured out like floodwater. "It wasn't supposed to kill her, okay? We needed time, money. We thought if she was hospitalized, we could handle the finances while she recovered." Reyes kept her tone flat. "And who came up with that idea?" He hesitated. "Lila said her parents' house was worth nearly $2 million. She said if something happened to them, everything came to her. I told her it was crazy. But the bills kept coming, the gambling debts." He stopped himself, face tightening. "So she convinced you?" Reyes pressed. "She said it would only make Mara sick for a while." "Just enough to—" He swallowed hard. "To make it look like stress or a bad reaction. I found the pills online. I still had a prescription for sedatives, and I forged the rest on my doctor's pad." I felt my fists clench so tight, my nails cut skin. Reyes flipped through a file. "We found the forgery, the search history, everything. You mixed both medications into the pasta sauce, didn't you?" Curtis nodded slowly, shame soaking every syllable. "She watched me do it. She said, 'That should be enough.' And when Mara started screaming, she told me not to call anyone." He broke then, head in his hands, voice muffled. "I swear I wanted to stop, but she said we couldn't turn back. She said we were already in it together." Reyes leaned toward the microphone. "One more question, Curtis. When your neighbor called for help, why did you stop him?" Curtis looked up, eyes hollow. "Because Lila told me if an ambulance came, we'd lose everything. She said to let nature take its course." The room fell silent except for the buzz of fluorescent lights. I stared through the glass, watching him crumble. The man who once called me Dad now looked like the ghost of every lie I'd ever ignored. Reyes turned to me quietly. "We'll charge them both with attempted murder and conspiracy. The DA's preparing the paperwork tonight?" I nodded, though the victory tasted like ashes. The truth was worse than I'd imagined, because it wasn't just greed, it was choice. Cold, deliberate choice. Curtis had confessed, but the real mastermind was still out there, and her next move would be the most dangerous one yet. When Curtis's confession hit the system, it moved faster than I expected. By the next morning, the DA's office had everything they needed: forged prescriptions, toxicology reports, financial records, even his signed statement naming Lila as the instigator. I sat across from Detective Reyes in her office as she placed a printed transcript between us. "Curtis turned on her completely," she said. "He's willing to testify in exchange for a reduced sentence. Once we process this, Lila's going away for a long time." I looked at the words on the page. She said we couldn't turn back. I used to think those words were something a child said when she was scared. Now I knew they belonged to someone who had stopped being my child a long time ago. That afternoon, they brought Lila in for formal arraignment. I watched from the back of the courtroom, unseen by her until the last moment. When her eyes met mine, the mask she'd been wearing for months, the practiced innocence, cracked just a little. Her lips trembled, but she didn't speak. The judge read the charges: attempted murder, conspiracy, obstruction. Each one landed like a hammer blow. Her lawyer, a sharp-faced woman in a navy suit, stood quickly. My client maintains her innocence, Your Honor. She was manipulated by her husband, who has a documented history of gambling and deceit. I almost laughed. Curtis was many things: a coward, a liar, a weak man. But even he hadn't been smart enough to mastermind something like this. That kind of calculation came from Lila. After the hearing, Reyes found me near the corridor. "She's playing the sympathy card," she said, blaming Curtis, claiming she didn't know what he was doing. "She knew," I said, my voice flat. "Every last detail," Reyes nodded. "Then we'll make sure the jury knows it too." Over the next few weeks, the case exploded across the news. Daughter and husband charged in poison plot. Neighbors gave interviews about how sweet Lila used to be, how shocking it all was. But no one knew the version of her that I did. The one who had quietly asked about wills, the one who smiled while her mother was dying in the next room. Mara followed every headline quietly, recovering slowly, but carrying a strength I hadn't seen before. One night, while we sat at the kitchen table reviewing court updates, she whispered, "I'll testify if I have to." I looked at her, the woman they'd nearly taken from me. "I know you will. But if you do, she'll see what she destroyed, and what she couldn't." The pre-trial conference came and went. Then, suddenly, Reyes called again. "She's breaking," the detective said. "Her lawyer's trying to negotiate a plea. Looks like she finally realizes the evidence is airtight." For a long time, I didn't say anything. When I did, my voice was calm, steady. Let her plead. But not for mercy, for the truth. The case was closing in, but I wasn't ready for what her final words in court would reveal. A truth even darker than her crime. The courtroom smelled of paper, polish, and tension. It was the day of the plea hearing, the day Lila would finally face the truth she'd been running from. Mara sat beside me in the second row, her hands trembling, but steady enough to hold mine. She had insisted on coming. "I want to see her say it," she'd whispered earlier that morning. "I want to hear it from her own mouth." When Lila entered, the room fell silent. Gone was the expensive wardrobe and perfect hair. She wore a gray suit, borrowed and ill-fitted. Her eyes darted briefly to us, but there was no emotion there, just exhaustion, and maybe the faintest flicker of shame. The judge read the charges one last time. Attempted murder in the second degree, conspiracy to commit murder, obstruction of justice. Her attorney stood. "Your Honor, my client wishes to change her plea to guilty on all counts in exchange for a reduced sentence." The judge nodded. "Ms. Richards, you understand the consequences of this plea?" Lila's voice shook as she answered, "Yes, Your Honor." The prosecutor stood and read aloud the summary of evidence: Curtis's full confession, the forged prescription, the toxicology, the financial motive, the browser searches. Each piece of proof stacked like bricks around her. When it ended, the judge gave her one chance to speak. "Ms. Richards, before sentencing, would you like to make a statement?" The room held its breath. She turned slightly toward us. I could feel her eyes on me, though I refused to meet them at first. Then her voice, quieter, thinner than I'd ever heard, broke the silence. "Dad, Mom, I don't expect forgiveness." Her voice trembled, but she kept going. "I never meant to kill you, Mom. I just wanted to buy us time. We were drowning in debt. Curtis said there was no way out. I told myself it was just medicine, that it wouldn't be fatal." Mara flinched beside me. Lila's eyes filled with tears. I hated what we were becoming, the lies, the begging, the fear. But I thought if we could just survive a little longer, things would fix themselves. And when it went wrong, I panicked. I should have called for help. I know that. I just couldn't face you. Her voice cracked into sobs, raw and broken. Every night since I've seen your face, Mom. The way you looked at me before you collapsed. That's my punishment. Prison can't touch that. The judge spoke softly. 15 years. Possibility of parole after 12. May God grant you reflection. As the gavel fell, I finally looked at her. She mouthed 2 words through her tears. I'm sorry. I wanted to believe it. I really did. But forgiveness doesn't grow where betrayal takes root. The guards led her away. The door shut behind her. The sound echoed like a full stop at the end of a life sentence. For all of us. Justice had spoken, but even as the courtroom emptied, I couldn't shake one question. When your own blood betrays you, does the punishment ever truly end?